Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 230, Gratitude Without Guilt, Setting Thanksgiving Boundaries for Self-Care. Well, welcome back to this month, which as you know, if you've been listening, is all about needs, not wants. And we've been talking about how to identify what we need, how to validate them for ourselves, and how to put our needs out there in healthier ways. Well, no better time to do this than around the holidays. And there's a big one happening this week in the U.S., so I thought this was good timing. If you like what we've been talking about here on the show, consider taking the work a bit deeper and give yourself the gift of change. My online course is an immersive self-paced program along with group coaching to give you the education, the system, and the support you need to create what I think is real change in your life, sustained change. So jump in there in the show notes and sign up before prices go up. Okay, so let's get into the concept of setting boundaries around the holidays and why it's so important to learn how to navigate this issue in the healthiest way possible. So first, let's do a quick refresher on what boundaries are. Boundaries are where you end and others begin. They define you separate from other. Doing the who owns what that we talk about a lot here on the show. Whose thoughts, whose feelings, whose choices, whose behaviors, whose struggle. Each person, especially when it comes to holiday stuff, has to come to acceptance, kicking and screaming oftentimes, about what is true for the other. So that means there's going to be grief work involved where there's change. And that's for everyone in the situation, and that's okay. It's just that some people have a hard time with the ability to grieve. So let's get into what we mean by setting boundaries to get needs met around the holidays. Well, the big one, the obvious one, is saying no to family. Saying no to family requests. How do we do that? Well, the way we do it is to be clear and kind and direct. So when saying no, be clear and direct in your communication. Try not to do any ambiguity because you really want to prevent misunderstandings and you don't want to put people on the defensive. You don't want to beat around the bush. And it's about keeping it about you, expressing your needs, sharing your own needs and your own limitations for the holidays. Let your family know that your decision to say no to whatever it is about taking care of yourself, not a rejection of them. See the detachment there? It's about taking care of yourself, not a rejection of them. Them wanting you to be there is totally valid. You not being able to show up is also totally valid. Because there's nothing necessarily wrong with what they're asking or expecting. Especially, and this is where it gets hard, when it's been a tradition for years and years and years, where everybody did X and you're supposed to be there. Or you're supposed to do the holiday the way it's always been done. And that's hard for people. I mean, traditions are great. Rituals are great. They help us feel grounded and connected. They help us feel safe. But sometimes we need to break with tradition. And that's where you can offer some alternatives. So if possible, try to suggest alternatives or compromises. This shows you're willing to find solutions that work for everyone. Now, I know some situations are either or. Are you going to be there Thanksgiving Day or not? Kind of either or. But many are not. The other thing we have to do is not wait till the 11th hour, which a lot of people do, to say, hey, Mom, I'm not going to be home for Thanksgiving, because that's not fair. Communicate your boundaries early on so there's a mutual understanding before the holiday events unfold. I tell clients give them as much time as you would want if the shoe was on the other foot. And that's what's difficult because there's a lot of anxiety about having that conversation, that oftentimes people put it off and they avoid and they procrastinate, and then they wait till the 11th hour, then they make a mess. Because then you're really going to upset someone. So what we're talking about is carving time out for you. Setting boundaries around you and what you want and what you need. And that's really important if you're going to be either setting boundaries with family or deciding to join family and it's not very healthy and you have to find ways to take care of yourself. So schedule me time where and whenever you can. Prioritize and schedule time for yourself in your calendar. And you got to treat this as sacred, non-negotiable, just like you would any other commitment. That means even and especially if you're traveling to home or to the in-laws to stay there for several days because you live far away. What helps the most is to schedule in the boundaries ahead of time, like ways you can get out of the house, like taking a walk, taking a drive, or going out and doing an activity with just your partner, with your sister, etc. Make sure you build in time to regroup and recharge. Like just because everyone else wants to drink and play cards till 1 a.m. doesn't mean you do. If you're going with your partner and your kids, make sure you guys have a plan for the time there. This is so important. Like the escape hatches we just mentioned. And check in with each other often throughout the trip to stick to said plan and to deal with, the things that are going to come up, the crap that happens. Like people's behavior. Like maybe snarky remarks your mom made to your partner. Or requests that come out of the blue that are just nuts. So what couples tell me often is that when they do that and they stick to the plan and they do the mini huddles, they go in the bedroom, close the door and take 5 minutes and debrief and figure out what to do next. It helps them not fight amongst themselves, right? And it helps them stay together and to be able to support each other and to feel a lot better because there's just that boundary there, right? That psychological boundary that we are taking some healthy control of our holiday kind of boundary. And speaking of, we have to talk about expectations if we're talking about holidays. Try to set realistic expectations and give that some thought. Be realistic about what you can and cannot accomplish during the holiday. Because you know what happens if you set unrealistic expectations. You're going to be stressed out and disappointed. And this includes expectations about others. This includes, and I know this sounds crazy, but everybody does it, around other people's unhealthy behavior. Like maybe this holiday it's going to magically be different. Probably not. Lovely surprise if it happens. But a lot of emotional stuff happens for people when they go home, and not only are you getting triggered around all your childhood stuff, but you're also getting triggered with the expectation or the delusion that they're going to be different this time. So working on some grief work before you go is really important. Communicate early if there are any specific limitations or changes in plans. Try to get clarity on that early and let people know what you can do. Like you can say, I have to leave the day after Thanksgiving, Mom, but I'm happy to come in Wednesday night and help you cook, or something like that. Get very specific and clear. Unhealthy families, a lot of times they don't want to be specific. They don't know how to do boundaries. And so everyone's there for days or days. They don't know what's going on. That's not good. Try to prioritize. Identify what your priorities are for the holiday season and try to focus on them. And this may involve letting go of some traditions or events that aren't essential to you right now. This is the boundary work right here, getting realistic and getting real with self and getting clear with others. This isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about having conversations to negotiate needs ahead of time the best that people can. So they have a basic idea of what's going to happen, what's going to go down, and what have people agreed to. So there isn't all of this last minute conflict because something wasn't discussed. like there was an expectation and someone's mind was supposed to be read, right? We don't want to have any of that. In loving passive-aggressive families, you're going to see a lot of that. People getting pissed off because someone didn't read their mind about coming in early helping to prep food. The person didn't know because you didn't ask them. So we can't talk about setting boundaries during the holiday season and taking care of yourself without talking about guilt. That's the first and the biggest thing that comes up, and it's the biggest obstacle that gets in the way of taking care of ourselves. Now, you know there's two types of guilt if you've been listening here. There's the earned guilt, and this is based on a real wrongdoing or violation of your values. Like if you promised to help with something and then couldn't follow through, you might feel some earned guilt. But when it comes to this holiday season, I want you to be very mindful of which one you're dealing with. Is it earned guilt or is it unearned? Meaning you feel bad without a clear reason or justification. Setting boundaries, especially during the holidays, often leads to, I think, a lot of unearned guilt because people feel they're letting others down. Now, that's natural to feel regret around, wow, I know my sister's going to be really disappointed. But that's not what I'm talking about. I think it goes further for a lot of people because they grew up in a family with very poor boundaries where everyone felt responsible for everyone else's feelings and choices and thoughts and reactions. And so if you don't have any healthy detachment there, how you're not going to feel overwhelming guilt for how everyone else is going to feel on that holiday. It's really important to work on the guilt thing or we won't take care of ourselves. Remember, setting boundaries is not synonymous with being unkind or discompassionate. Taking care of yourself is a good thing because when you do, you're actually better able to show up for others in a more positive and present way. You have more empathy, you're calmer, you're more grounded. You're just going to be a better person. And that's what I want you to really focus on. Think about the moments in the recent past where you did take care of yourself and you were so much nicer to be around. And that's why. Guilt can be a really heavy burden, and by addressing it, we can create space for more joy, more relaxation, and meaningful connections. Guilt's going to keep us from setting healthy boundaries, from doing what's best for ourselves, and we're not going to practice self-care. I mean, feeling guilty, again, is a natural emotion, but it's really essential to evaluate whether it's earned or unearned. And if it's unearned, I want you to know that it's okay to release that guilt and prioritize your own well-being. And do a lot of self-reflection here and bounce it off healthy people. And that'll give you a better sense of whether you should feel like crap or not about Thanksgiving. Okay? Because you need objectivity around you to help you do that. And instead of guilt, turn it into regret. Maybe some sadness. A lot of people have to set boundaries with family of origin, not because they want to, but because they feel like they have to for their own sanity. Now, what they want is ideally to have a family that they can't wait to come home and see and hang out with and enjoy that experience. When people don't have that, they have to grieve. They have to go kicking and screaming to acceptance. That's why the self-reflection and processing with healthy people is so important. But we got to normalize self-care. Can't let the fear of grief get in the way of doing that. It's not selfish. It's a necessary aspect of maintaining our overall well-being. We are responsible for taking care of ourselves. We know that we're responsible for taking care of our physical health and paying our bills and going to work and doing the things. Why is this not the same? I think it's because it's invisible, and I think it's because many cultures have such a work ethic that it's work ethic at any price, and often the price is to your well-being. Or you're supposed to just stuff your feelings and suck it up and keep it moving. So we're trying to shift that as a society, little by little. I think the more we can overcome unearned guilt associated with it, the better. And I know it. I know it is so much harder if your family in particular doesn't practice this or value it. Just know that just because they doesn't mean you. Just because they can't value it doesn't mean you can't. Doesn't mean it's not important. Doesn't mean they're being healthy, because they're not. So one of the most important things we can do when we're getting ready to set boundaries is to be as grounded as we possibly can, to feel as glued together as we possibly can, our insides matching our outsides. And gratitude was in the title today because when you can focus on what you're grateful for, it really helps you get out of that fight or flight or freeze or fawn that you're probably going to be in around your family. Especially when the anxiety comes up about setting boundaries. Trying to stay grateful, be present as much as you can for what you have going on in your life, grateful that you can even have this conversation with your family, proud of yourself for working on yourself, that kind of thing. Make sure you're being emotionally present with the healthy people in your life who can hear you. Make sure you're not spreading yourself too thin, because you're not going to have the wherewithal to take care of yourself with your family. Because this will be up to you. And what we also need to talk about here is what I call the other boundary work, and that's the self-discipline, the internal boundaries. And that is just as important as the external work. It usually comes secondary to the external work. Usually when we think of boundary work, we start setting boundaries with others. But here's the thing. Self-discipline is going to play a crucial role when it comes to setting boundaries, because you're going to need that to manage your guilt, prioritize your self-care, and make it happen. You have to be solid. You have to follow through. Doesn't matter what you tell your family. You have to actually follow through with what you said you were going to do. And or not cave on what you said you couldn't do. You need clarity and consistency. So self-discipline involves maintaining clarity about your boundaries, like getting uber clear and being as consistent as you can upholding them. So this helps set the tone, the expectations for you and for those around you. Most situations require that you have to do it a couple times before your family doesn't think, oh, they just lost their mind this Christmas. It's okay. Or this is just an anomaly. But once you do it a couple times, people get used to it. Their brain acclimates, and then it's on to the next thing. It's really hard to resist the pressure, though, because during the holidays, there's going to be pressure to overcommit and engage in activities that go against your boundaries. And self-discipline empowers you to resist the pressure and stay true to yourself. So you have to be very intentional. I call it mindful decision-making. You need to make mindful decisions that align with your values and your well-being. So when guilt comes up, your self-discipline helps remind you, let's think about this. Is it earned or unearned guilt? Why am I setting this boundary? And that way I can follow through. And that's all the work in our head that we have to do over and over and over again. It is exhausting at first. It gets easier because you internalize it over time. It's like riding a bike. After a while, you don't even have to think about it. Being disciplined helps you shift your focus from out there to inside and from guilt to positive actions. Instead of dwelling on how bad you feel, you can redirect your energy towards how good it is that you're setting this boundary to take care of yourself. Self-discipline means being assertive in our communication, and this allows you to express what you need and express your boundaries with clarity and confidence, because it's going to help you not do that passive-aggressive communication style, especially if you set a boundary and then a family member says something snarky and you want to get defensive. Try to really resist that. Resist the guilt-inducing tactics. Because they're going to unintentionally or intentionally use guilt on you. And when you get back to your plan, like in your head, like, nope, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. It helps you be stronger in resisting all that stuff. Because you're trying to strike a balance between accommodating other people and preserving your well-being. And sometimes that's not always easy to figure out in a given situation, but that's why we have to do all that mental work. And the discipline helps you become more consistent. Self-care is not just a one-off. It needs to be a part of your routine. This is what you are doing. This is what you do. And when it becomes more regular, it really means that you're going to be more proactive about not burning out during the holiday season, not caving, all the things, because you were intentional about what you were willing and not willing to do. When you do this, when you mean it, by making it real and keeping it real, I think you build self-trust. I think you lower your anxiety. Even though initially there's more anxiety because you're changing things. But I think you, over time, raise your happiness level. The hard part about boundaries is maintaining them after you set them. When it comes to the day before Thanksgiving and you get another phone call or your mom's in tears or. It's not about being perfect, though. It's about trying to do it for the most part. And a lot of times people say, this is the year that I'm going to set boundaries, and they don't. That's okay. Every time you talk about it, every time you think about it, every time you gripe about it, every time you journal about it, you are getting stronger and stronger, and pretty soon you'll be able to actually do it. The biggest thing is getting support and using your support, which means reaching out. There's nothing more vulnerable than setting limits with family, especially a not very functional family, at the holidays. And if you're new to setting boundaries, this is going to feel a little overwhelming for you. That's why you need at least 3 people to have your back, who will remind you of why you're doing this, like 14 times. And what might the reality be if you don't? Like, they're going to remind you why you wanted to set this boundary in the first place. Let's talk about some of the consequences if you don't. You're going to resent the family. You're going to resent the event, the holiday. You're going to resent yourself for not following through on that boundary you've been talking all year about. It's going to obviously take some of the joy out of the holiday for you. You're going to have anxiety. You're probably going to act out in some way, maybe shut down when you get there. And you're going to be incongruent with taking care of yourself. So you have to remember why you're doing it and what are the costs of not doing it every time you become afraid. And if you do it alone, you will cave. That's why you need support. Each of us will. Because what we need the most in the beginning of this process is permission. And we need a lot of it in the beginning. We need to know it's okay to say no. We need to know it's okay to say no to family. We need to know why it's okay to say no to family. And we need to know it's still okay 5 days later when we start getting anxious. We need that information, that mirroring, that encouragement, and all the reasons why we're not bad people for taking care of ourselves with our family. So it's really important to first let them in on your plan so you can get their objective feedback and they know what's going on. And 2, you have to keep them posted a lot in the beginning, and it's okay. You won't have to do this forever, and you have to have a support system when you're getting ready to do it, like before and after the phone call to mom. Then you debrief after so you can see how it went. And it's not going to go great the first couple of times you do this. It doesn't go great for everyone. It's usually pretty bumpy. Gratefully, some people have some positive experiences where it doesn't go awful. And so that empowers them to do it again. But if you stick to your plan, your family's just going to have to accept it. Eventually, they're probably going to act out and do some punishing and things like that. And that's what you have your support system for, to help you prepare for that. I promise you that probably not right away, but eventually you will be grateful for taking care of yourself despite the circumstances. So today, let's remember that setting boundaries during the holidays is an act of self-love and often self-preservation. When we embrace the self-discipline, it allows us to communicate our needs clearly, navigate guilt with intentionality, and prioritize our self-care without compromise. When we find a balance between our responsibilities and our well-being, then we can try to create a holiday season that is not only joyful for those around us, but meaningful for us. Remember, it's okay to say no, and it's okay to prioritize your mental health, and it's okay to design a holiday experience that feels good for you. Remember to use detachment, work through the guilt, get support, and find acceptance. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you walked away with a couple things that you can use for this holiday. Make sure you check out the course in the show notes and join the Facebook group. That's a great place if you need support and some backup when you're making big changes. All right. Pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.